Okay, thank you all for joining. Excuse me. Thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna take a brief sip of water because I've been talking on the phone all day. My name is Dan Novak. I'm a vice president and associate general counsel at Penguin Random House, the world's largest publisher of trade books. I'm really delighted to have this group to speak to, and we're going to be talking about an important lawsuit that we filed this morning. Penguin Random House, in partnership with the Iowa State Educators Association, two middle school teachers, a district librarian, a student and parent, and four best-selling and critically acclaimed authors, those are Lori House Anderson, John Green, Melinda Lowe, and Jodi Picoult, have joined forces to challenge Senate File 496 in Iowa. I'm going to tell you a little bit about 496 and why we're challenging it, and then I'll lead into a statement on behalf of Penguin Random House. 496 was enacted in May 2023 and prohibits books that feature any description or depiction of sex, regardless of context, from public school and classroom libraries. This includes fiction and nonfiction alike, and the ban on depictions, references to sex, cover students all the way through 12th grade. That's the entirety of a student's public school journey. Senate File 496 also prohibits books relating in any way to gender identity or sexual orientation from school and classroom libraries for students through 6th grade. Our legal challenge will seek a court order blocking enforcement of the parts of 496 that restrict books and their availability to students. These restrictions violate the First Amendment, free speech, and 14th Amendment equal protection clauses of the U.S. Constitution. Penguin Random House creates books for everyone from all walks of life. We embrace pluralism of thought because that is how the best ideas win out over time. That doesn't mean that every book is for every person at every juncture in their life. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. I'm reminded of S.R. Ranganathan's proposed laws of library science, specifically Law 1, books are for use, 2, every person his or her book, and 3, every book its reader. As a publisher, we commission books based on an idea presented by an author. Once that idea finds form in a final manuscript, we begin the work of finding that book's readers. Who better to match authors and readers than librarians and teaching professionals? Yet, legislatures across the country are usurping the role of educators and denying agency to parents and students. Laws now define which ideas are acceptable for students, even in their independent reading. Senate File 496 is a book ban, plain and simple. It blocks any book containing a so-called sexual act from all library shelves, regardless of context. It's also created the paradox that under Iowa law, a 16-year-old student is old enough to consent to sex, but not old enough to read about it in school. The ban applies equally to fiction and nonfiction alike, meaning that it doesn't just block ideas, it blocks information. It also blocks books that reference sexuality or gender identity from being accessed through the 6th grade. Proponents of censorship complain that our schools are awash in pornography. But when you look at banned book lists, they are filled with seminal works like Native Son, The Color Purple, 1984. These are all books that are currently on banned lists in Iowa in various districts. No great American novel can survive Senate 496. It is a return to the moral panics of the decades past. 60 years ago, Bantam Books challenged and defeated a Rhode Island commission that banned objectionable books from being sold. Our lawsuit isn't breaking new ground as much as it is retreading long-corrected mistakes. Government authorities cannot violate the First Amendment right to free speech by pretending that school grounds are constitutional no-fly zones. If the government does not like an author's expressed viewpoints, it can compete in the marketplace of ideas by introducing speech of its own. Banning a book is the resort of a government that has lost confidence in the power of its own message. Penguin Random House is not asking anyone to read or buy our books that does not want them, but we can insist on them not being blocked due to their departure from government orthodoxy. Not only are book bans wrong, they are counterproductive. If a student cannot discover quality books curated by trained and dedicated professionals, such as teachers and librarians, unreliable sources from the internet and social media will fill the gap. Students will be more likely to enter the world ill-equipped to handle challenging perspectives or ideas. They'll be at a loss of information, and they will lose their ability to adapt and grow as independent thinkers. So this is very much an issue of democracy. As a publisher, we proudly connect authors with readers. We're honored to stand with authors like Laurie Halse Anderson, John Green, Melinda Lowe, and Jodi Picoult, who have shaped countless lives for the better by exposing young Americans to new insights about the world around them. We are proud to stand with educators, associations like the ISEA, and parents fighting to preserve access for their children and the young adults in their communities. And I feel personally very privileged to stand with Haley Bonds, our student plaintiff, who has risen up to demand her government respect her right to read. Let the best ideas win. Thank you.
My name is Mike Baranek, and I'm a third grade teacher that's been retired from the West Des Moines Community School District. And I'm also serving as president of the Iowa State Education Association. The ISEA represents Iowa education professionals all across the state, including pre-K-12 teachers, education support professionals, community college faculty, area education agency professionals, retired educators, and aspiring educators. We promote quality public education by placing students at the center of everything we do while advocating for education professionals. My third grade classroom library was full of every book imaginable. My students loved reading about Ruby Bridges becoming the first Black child to integrate the all-white William Franz Elementary School as a 6-year-old girl in the biography, I Am Ruby Bridges. They heard about a young minister's son who discovered an underground railroad in his father's home. In this book titled Brady, written by Gene Fritz, the young man is confronted with the horrors of slavery, and he was forced to make his own decisions about what he believes. Third grade students became familiar with female activists Annie Hutchinson, Phyllis Wheatley, and others as they read They Led the Way, 14 American Women, written by Joanna Johnston. I planned lessons around the books that brought them flying on carpets to other countries and introduced them to farmlands, jungles, oceans, people, and cultures they had never heard of before. This began their long educational journey toward developing solid, critical thinking skills and a taste for the knowledge through other cultures, ideas, and opinions. The ISEA has always supported the free inclusion of ideas, identities, and cultures. Our public school professionals are the experts in the field of education, and they help our students develop critical thinking skills. Iowa's educators are trained in what are age-appropriate materials for our classrooms and what is included on our library shelves. When we can offer a range of resources, we are providing our students the opportunity to think critically about how they can live successfully in a democratic society and the world around them. We stand firmly on the side of the experts in our schools and the parents or guardians supporting their children. We know parental input and involvement are critical to a child's success in school. Every Iowa school district has protocols in place in which parents or guardians can participate in their child's educational programs. But we take issue with any parent or guardian censoring materials for everyone else's child. Our partnership in this lawsuit is one of many ways we are advocating to protect and promote the growth and success of all of the students in our care. We will always support the students who walk through the doors of our schools and the professionals who guide them along the way. Now, before we move on, I would just like to remind everyone that we have links in our chat box that will have a copy of the litigation. And we also have in the chat box all of the statements and bios of all of the plaintiffs. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really nice to have everybody here kind of in the same bizarre space. My name is Laurie Halse Anderson. I write books for children and for teenagers. My novel Speak is the story of a 13-year-old rape victim struggling to find the courage to speak up about what happened to her. I wrote this book because I was raped when I was 13, and I didn't tell anyone about it for a very, very long time. Like so many victims of sexual violence, my untreated trauma led to years of depression and suffering. After it was published in 1999, Speak quickly became a standard novel used in high school English classes across the country. In the past 24 years, I've spoken to more than 1 million of those students about sexual violence, trauma, and how to speak up when a bad thing happens. Thousands and thousands of my readers have shared their stories with me, stories of being raped or sexually abused or sexually harassed. They tell me that Speak and my memoir, Shout, gave them the information that they needed in order to speak up, to reach out and to get appropriate support. Readers who haven't been a victim appreciate the vitally important conversations about consent and about the laws that govern sexual violence, conversations that develop as a natural outgrowth of sharing the book. Boys in particular tell me that they didn't realize the impact that sexual violence or harassment has on a victim before they read my book. Bad things happen to our children much more than anyone wants to admit. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys are the victims of sexual abuse or violence. More than 4 in 5 female rape survivors report that they were first raped before age 25, and almost half of them were raped before they turned 18. The perpetrators of sexual violence against children and teens are rarely strangers. So we don't get away with just teaching stranger danger and thinking that we're done, that we're finished. 91% of child sexual abuse is carried out by somebody who is known and trusted by the child or the child's family. And the effects of sexual violence can last for a lifetime. When confronted with challenging topics like sexual violence, some people prefer to stick their heads in the sand. That makes children vulnerable to predators, and it ensures that another generation of adults will grow up to become predators. We have the tools we need to dramatically reduce these horrifying statistics. Books, story. Literature has the power to open hearts, heal souls, and promote growth and understanding. Nonfiction books can supply information and offer perspective and personal experience. The families of Iowa deserve robust, well-curated libraries in their communities, in their schools, and in their classrooms. The families of Iowa have the right to supervise and choose what their own children are reading, of course. But no one group of parents or politicians has the right to limit the books available to other citizens. Democracy can be uncomfortable. Democracy means learning to live with people who have different opinions than you have. Democracy, as defined in the Constitution of the United States, means that publicly funded libraries must offer a variety of books, perspectives, and information, and that we all have the freedom to read and to think without government interference. I urge all the residents of Iowa to contact their state representatives and local school board members. Speak up against Iowa Senate File 496. Speak up for vibrant libraries and public education. Speak up for your right to read. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Melinda Lowe. So 2 years ago in November 2021, I won the National Book Award in Young People's Literature for my novel, Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I have a prop. During my acceptance speech, I warned of a rising tide of book bans targeting books about people of color and LGBTQ people. I said, I urge every one of you watching to educate yourselves about your school boards and vote in your local elections. 2022 is coming, and we need your support to keep our stories on the shelves. Don't let them erase us. Last Night at the Telegraph Club is a coming-of-age novel set in 1950s San Francisco during the time of McCarthyism, about a 17-year-old Chinese American girl who is discovering her identity as a lesbian. It is a novel about family, community, and falling in love for the first time. In the 2 years since it won the National Book Award, it has been banned, challenged, or restricted in over 40 school districts and communities across the country, including 6 in Iowa. Last Night at the Telegraph Club is one of the only, if not the only, historical novel for young adults about a Chinese American lesbian. In those 40 communities, those bans effectively erase all representation of this experience. I am a Chinese American lesbian myself, and since Telegraph Club was published, many queer Asian Americans have reached out to me to tell me how much this book meant to them, because our lives are so often invisible in our culture. Seeing yourself in a book can be a transformative and empowering experience, one that I rarely had when I was growing up. This is why I write about queer and Asian American characters. I am writing books that I want to read, the books that I needed as a teen. So when my publisher informed me of this lawsuit, I immediately knew that I wanted to join as a plaintiff for 2 reasons. First, I am an immigrant. I came to the United States with my family from China when I was about 3.5 years old. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, knowing that we came to this country to escape the oppression of the Chinese Communist government, which does not allow freedom of expression. So I have always valued my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. And when these book bans started, when my books started to be banned, it felt to me like a direct attempt to suppress my freedom of speech. These bans go directly against the ideals of this country. The second reason I wanted to join this lawsuit is because I feel a responsibility to my queer and Asian American readers, a responsibility to stand up for them and their rights to read about people like them. I am the author of 7 young adult novels so far, and all of them are about queer teen girls. Over the years, I've received countless messages from my readers, many of them queer teen girls, who tell me that reading my books have comforted them, have made them feel seen, have shown them that it's okay to be who they are. These book bans are clearly trying to stigmatize queer identities and queer sexuality, and I want to make it clear to everyone, but to my readers especially, that there is nothing shameful about queer sexuality. There is nothing shameful about being queer, period. Therefore, I am so grateful to have this opportunity to stand up for my readers and for the First Amendment. Thank you.
Okay, we can open up for question and answer. Thank you, Melinda, Lori, Dan, Mike. I think the way to do this would be if you'd like to put your name and that you have a question in the chat, that's great, or you can raise your little hand on screen. And if you could please direct your question to the person you would like to have it answered by, that would be great. I'm not seeing any hands. Lori Bellin.
I think I can field Laura's question. The question is Penguin Random House and the group of plaintiffs seeking to block the entire law or just the book ban provisions of 496? The latter. Senate File 496 encompasses a lot of activity in schools. It goes into curricula, it goes into interaction between teachers and students. As a publisher, we do not have standing to challenge that. We have drawn the line where we are able to, which is to protect the books. So our injunction would only seek to block the library and classroom library collection provisions of 496 and ensure that there is a safe zone for students to be able to encounter alternate viewpoints. Marjorie's question, has a lawsuit been filed in which court? Yes, the lawsuit was filed. It was filed at about 9 a.m. Central Time this morning. It's in the Southern District of Iowa, which is based in Des Moines.
You see the question from Aaron.
Aaron, have any of the involved groups filed similar lawsuits in any other states? Yes. Penguin Random House is a plaintiff in a lawsuit in Florida, centered in Escambia County. There are many parallels between this lawsuit and the Florida lawsuit. The main distinction would be that the earlier lawsuit that we filed this summer was against a district, a county, Escambia, which is the Pensacola area of Florida, where not under any compulsion from state law, but rather of their own initiative, school authorities were pulling dozens of books off of library shelves. So it's the same principle of standing up for books in libraries, but this is a new paradigm in the sense that this is a removal of local control. Senate File 496 does not allow the districts that want Melinda and Lori's books in there to have any opt-in or otherwise. So this is removing all discretion from all districts in the state.
Hey, Stephen, I think you were next. Stephen Gruber Miller, Des Moines Register.
Thanks for doing the press conference. I'm wondering if you can talk about the provision that prevents teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity, and how that relates to the book section. It sounds like you're only seeking to have the court declare that that section of the law does not apply to books in classrooms, but I'd welcome any clarification about that.
So that's correct. The curricula is a whole different animal from a constitutional law perspective. I won't opine on the merits of anything outside of our legal challenge. I will observe that the ACLU has filed a challenge that encompasses those aspects, and so there are two lawsuits currently now against that are challenging Senate File 496. The state, any analysis of schools has to begin with the acknowledgement that the state has some leeway to express their preferred message. Where we are drawing the line is libraries, because those have always traditionally been places where there is no orthodoxy that is enforced. And so even if the state is allowed to express its preferred view of sexuality, gender identity, etc., in the classroom, there has to be a safety valve for students to be able to encounter alternate perspectives. I'm not issuing any other issue. I want to be clear. This is not merely an issue of LGBT rights, of sexual freedom, I think Lori spoke incredibly persuasive about how this is about arming kids with information about things that I don't consider to be about sex. I don't think sexual assault has anything to do with sex. And so you can already see that the overbreadth of this law covers so many things that go beyond any discussion about what's obscene or otherwise. But our position at Penguin Random House is that this sex, race, politics, no idea can be banned by government authorities. And so there's a universal position here that applies with equal force, were this about any other idea that was disfavored.
Thank you. I think we have Grant next, then Caleb, then John. Grant, go ahead.
Thanks. My question is for Lori. Governor Kim Reynolds and other lawmakers who support this law have sometimes described the books that they're attempting to target as pornography or pornographic. And I wonder what your reaction is to that.
I think that anybody who finds a book about a 13-year-old rape survivor as being pornographic needs some professional help.
Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was wondering if you're going to do that. Didn't want to take over the mic. It's interesting. Some people are protesting against graphic novels because they think that the word graphic novels indicates that they contain graphic sexuality inside of them. which might, through those of us who work in publishing, it's kind of astonishing, but I guess that's something we have to think about. So maybe what the problem is that we have to come to a common understanding about a couple of definitions. A graphic novel is a book that has illustrations in it. It is not a book that has graphic sexuality in it. And then let's figure out, let's talk about the public federal laws about obscenity. There's a lot of information in our lawsuit about the decisions by the Supreme Court and other courts regarding obscenity. And I would really look forward to talking to Governor Reynolds after she reads through the lawsuit, because I think there's a lot in there that she can learn from.
If I could tag in there, Laurie makes a great point. There are very well-defined standards that have existed for, I mean, now 50 years. Miller versus California is the case. It's been a lasting precedent since 1973, I believe. And there's a three-part test. It says, what laws like 496 are doing is they're skipping steps. They're jumping over aspects. And so in order for something to be obscene, you have to, sure, it has sexuality, has to maybe be something that some people find offensive. But the third factor that none of these laws ever have is that you have to do a holistic analysis of the work and conclude that it lacks a serious artistic, political, scientific, or news value. And so what you can see in the text of 496 is they don't have that factor. There is no analysis. It is a complete collapse of context. It creates a binary. Does this book have the thing that we find distasteful? If so, do not pass go directly to jail. And so what we're insisting on is let's follow the rules as set out by the court, which have guided our industry and other creative industries for half a century now, because those are rules that allow for a contextual analysis where people, if they want to engage any given book, they can do that. That is their right as a district to look at a book individually and figure out if, as a whole, it lacks serious artistic, political, scientific, or literary value. They're not doing that. That's not what the law allows, and in fact, it compels the opposite. Don't look deeper than a single sentence if that's what is causing concern.
And Grant, I want to jump in on this too. I really believe that once we begin this conversation about one book or about one topic, we really begin to lose sight of what democracy is and what the First Amendment means. Grant, I believe you've seen the lists that have been circulating around Iowa. Book titles that are on those lists do not just focus on this topic. There are Black authors, there are authors that bring forward historical perspectives of this country. And so really the picture is much bigger and much broader. And our children have a fundamental right to be able to choose the materials which they want to read and help them learn and grow.
Okay, Caleb, you're up next, and then we have John, and then we have Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this has been touched on a little bit already, but just to clarify, Dan, you mentioned, the distinction between what this law may prohibit and obscenity. I guess is your position, the position of plaintiffs, that there should be, no content restrictions outside of that obscenity test on public library books, or is there any role of, state government in addressing these concerns that the proponents of this law brought up around what they call, pornography and that kind of thing?
We are very skeptical of government authorities sitting hundreds or thousands of miles away from the communities that are tasked with educating children, deciding which books are okay or which are not. The role has always been teachers, librarians, educators. There's talk of a problem going on, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the kids that have gotten hurt. I haven't seen enough evidence, or really any evidence, that the teachers and librarians and educators are falling down on the job. They've always been the people that connect us and our authors to the books, and we find it no more appropriate that Penguin Random House decides what a young person reads than a state senator. That none of us should be in that equation. We present our ideas The students look for what they want to read, and they are curated and helped along the way by educators.
Thanks. And if I could ask a quick follow-up, you mentioned that this lawsuit addresses only the library book restrictions. Comparing this to what the Iowa Safe Schools and ACLU brought as well this week, is there, I guess, as far as your legal arguments, are there major differences in these two lawsuits?
To the extent they overlap, no. Our target on the book ban is also targeted by them. There's in no way do our arguments contradict one another, and that I would say that we're coming at it from a very different perspective. I would couch the ACLU is a civil rights organization. They bring to it expertise and perspective that fits their history as the America's I think oldest, I believe, or existing civil rights organization. We are a book publisher. We are authors. So what our perspective is, we are laser-like focused on that First Amendment aspect, which is it's about, are you banning viewpoints or not? That is the binary from our perspective. If it's a viewpoint question, then the answer is very simple. And so our case is narrower than the ACLU. It is streamlined to answer that specific question. We brought it for that reason, because we feel that is a different question than what is implicated in a larger review of 496, and we're confident that these cases will be complementary of one another.
Thank you. John is next, and then Todd.
Hi, John Marr from Publishers Weekly, which means you're about to get a trade question. Apologies for a bit of a curveball. Over the past couple of decades, Penguin Random House, among other major book publishers, has dedicated itself to increasing the number of books written by authors of diverse backgrounds. And those are often, if not mostly, the books that are challenged in cases including this one. Is there concern at Penguin Random House that this is going to impact the book trade and PRH in terms of sales, or is Penguin Random House seeing sales issues right now all around these books, specifically because they're being banned in so many districts?
So I want to make this is a good opportunity to make something that clear that may not have been salient in our papers. We are not seeking damages in this case. We're not asking the court to recoup lost sales, pay us back for the books that we missed out on. We see this as a First Amendment issue, and for that reason, the First Amendment is priceless to us, and so it would feel tacky to attach a price tag on our end. And so it is very much an issue of principle. I can tell you anecdotally, from my perch within Penguin Random House, that there's a lot of chaos going on around the country, and we're seeing it at every level, and there's no aspect of the business that is not being affected. What I would say is there have been people that have asked, well, why focus on this law? Why that? Why maybe focus on removals versus that, or concede this or that? We don't think this is the end point in the censorship battle. This is it could be the early stages. It could be, I hope it's the end point. It is hastened by this, but we feel that this is a fight that's going to be continuing for some time. And so we are prepared for a drawn out battle to restore sanity in the way that we are approaching public education and literature. I'm trying to answer your question in a not trade way. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. Todd Magel.
This would be a question for Mike. How much does the weight of having a giant book publisher now in your court, so to speak, give you confidence in being able to win this suit and send the message that you want to send?
Well, Todd, I can tell you that we are delighted to be in partnership with Penguin Random House. They truly understand the importance of how censorship It's affecting all of the children in our schools here in Iowa and of course across the country. And so we're delighted to be working closely with this team. And this is truly, as Dan was just saying, a much broader picture issue that will continue to move forward. And so while the ISEA has been actively working to bring this conversation to the forefront, having Penguin Random House be a part of this is incredibly important because what's happened, and Todd, you've noticed this, there is a minority narrative of individuals, a minority group of individuals around this country who is driving this conversation when the majority of people here in Iowa and across the country want all of our students to be able to have the free choice of what they read. And of course, as I said earlier, Todd, there are protocols in place here in the state where a parent, guardian, or foster care provider can select a book for their child not to read. And so to answer your question more concisely, working closely with this team is incredibly important, and it helps to bring forward the light on something that is truly affecting the First Amendment rights and the democracy of this country.
Yeah, and if I could, I want to circle back to something. You asked a question about commitment to diversity in publishing. I'm glad you've noticed. We're working very hard to open up the lens of people that are not only writing books, but are portrayed in them. Those are both important. I don't think we're not done with that. And unless we want to throw in the towel and say, well, gee, we gave it a good shot, but you know, the state governments decided they didn't want that. I think, you know, we have to fight. We have to be here. No one wants to be here, but we have to. We want more Melinda Lowe's to be joining the ranks of great authors. We're working her as hard as we can to get as many best-selling titles out of her, but she's one person. And so I don't want a youngster in high school or college that's thinking maybe looking at Melinda's career, Lori's career, and saying, I want to emulate that, but like, is there really going to be a space for me? That's a really tragic thing, a thought to enter someone's brain. And so we're not going to surrender that. And so rather than shifting our titles around to match the mix of political sentiment of the day, we're gonna have the North Star remain where it is, which is publish great works by an increasing diversity of voices. And I'll caveat that by saying that when I say we're a general interest trade publisher, like we are general interest, we cover everybody. We are very proud to publish all range of voices. There are books of every stripe, politically, religiously, you know, and everything in between. And so we are insisting on just as much on the rights of the Moms for Liberty to express their views as ours. We want them all out there in the marketplace of ideas. It's a hackneyed cliche that shows up in a lot of legal horn books, the marketplace of ideas. But the premise is sound. It's that everybody gets in there and gets to say how they feel. And then certain ideas, because they have increased relevance, currency, narrative power behind them, they win out. The consensus forms. And so we're not afraid of to present our authors' ideas out there and see what shakes out. We don't have much control other than to put them out there into the world. And so we're very grateful that we have authors here standing with us, because they've been doing it alone, frankly. And so we're here to show them that we have their back. And I think that when industry does it, you know, people, maybe some ears will perk up. And so we hope that the signal is that this is not something that the industry is willing to ignore.
Larissa, you're up next.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, if this doesn't work out in your guys' favor, what would be your next steps? Would you try and file again? Would you go at it a different approach? What would you do?
So we spoke about Florida. We're also involved in other efforts. It would take a long time to discuss every lawsuit we have some involvement in, but there was just a hearing yesterday in Texas involving the Reader Act, which has some similarities to 496. That was a suit that was brought by the AAP, which is the Association of American Publishers, which is a trade association that Penguin Random House is a member of. There was also an Arkansas act that the AAP brought a suit against. So there's a lot of places in a lot of different locations that we are active in. And we are under no illusion that everything is going to break in our direction in every instance. And so I think that the activity level and the breadth of activity reflect a realism that we have to plant a lot of seeds, make the case loudly and strongly everywhere, which one increases the odds that we will get action, but also sends a message to people that are considering enacting these policies in their own backyard that you should consider whether or not someone will have something to say and contest it. And I'm under no illusion that this case or another may make it to the US Supreme Court. People have asked me if that's a great idea. I think that there's no better time. There's no time like the present when it comes to litigating constitutional rights. There's no sense in waiting to figure out reading tea leaves or taking a barometric pressure reading, to see what we think the judicial winds are. I will observe that overwhelmingly so far, the cases that have been filed by us and our partners, we've had outstanding results at the trial level. They are now some of them are making their way through the appellate level. And so I've been nothing but encouraged by what I've seen so far. And it's not, nothing is preordained. And losing a case does not mean it wasn't worth bringing. Like I said, it's just as a matter of principle and making a statement.
And Larissa, I want to add just from the ISEA perspective, this is just one of the many ways that we're advocating for our students and our public education schools here in the state. We're in this also for the long run, but we've also been working closely with community members, community parents, organizations across the state. As you remember, the school board elections this past fall helped prove a point that the majority of people in this state agree with these concepts that are being put forward and are very angry that there is a small group of people who are trying to control what our students read. And so the ISEA is here in this capacity for the long run, but we're also here in the state for the long capacity in any way that we can advocate for for Iowa's public schools.
And at the risk of doing this for the umpteenth time, because now Mike has made me think of more things to say, it's not just litigation for us. We're doing a lot. I would encourage you all to go to our Banned Books Hub, PRH, Banned Books Hub. There's a lot of information there. It's supposed to be actionable. If you are a student, there's a page for you. If you are an educator, there's a page for you that will direct you to information you can use to protect yourself and advance these conversations in your community. We are active legislatively. We're trying to think about what we can do to change hearts and minds at the state and local levels to protect more people. And the reality is we're in a phase of our political system where we're finding out where the limits are to certain things. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that this case will turn upon a fairly simple question. Does the First Amendment apply in school libraries? If the answer to that is no, then Americans deserve to know the answer to that question is no. The answer has always been yes, but if something's changed, we'll find out. But that can be clarifying and galvanizing in its own way.
Well, seeing no more hands raised or questions in the chat box, I just would like to thank all of you for being a part of our conference today. This is an incredibly important issue, not only for us here in Iowa, but for the country as a whole. And I can't thank our guests enough who participated in this. And as always, the ISEA and Penguin Random House are available for future conversations. This is not going to be something that's a one and done shot. And so please keep us in mind when you'd like to help bring this message forward.
And the plaintiff statements, for those that couldn't join the call today, are Iowa resident plaintiffs, the teachers, librarians, student, and parent are all in that link that was provided. They're quite, I found their statements to be quite moving. Of course, I wouldn't be here if I didn't, but I would encourage you all to read them. They will express their perspective on all the many questions that our author, co-plaintiffs, and the ISEA and Penguin Random House have opined upon today.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the press conference. Thank you, everyone.